Good morning, everyone. Nolan, Bitcoiner. Another episode of The Breakup, a show where we try to take a psychological frame with fiat, that it's not about trading fiat for Bitcoin, it's about changing your entire outlook and your relationship with the money. It's about breaking up with the fiat world, the world that the US dollar helped create. Great world at the time, the one our grandparents built, the one that came after World War II that created all these institutions. Entropy sets in. They're all useless now. This show is about why those institutions are useless and why you should forget them. So we try to take a frame that this is all just a relationship you need to get out of, and we're going to underline why Bitcoin forms the basis of a more healthier relationship with your money. All right, great. So today's example just contrasts the types of things you get in a fiat world versus a Bitcoin world, right? So this is a fiat standard versus a Bitcoin standard. I wish this thing came across a little more evenly. So let's just look at what components go into either of these worlds, right? That's the important part here. Let's look at the components, right? So we're going to compare these, and each of these has a bit of a news story in it, right? So a current news story from today that we're going to look at. The first is moon rockets. Right, moon rockets. Old Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont, where I'm a soon-to-be gentleman farmer. So maybe my senator, Bernie, yesterday complained that it's inappropriate that private enterprise is going to the moon and that it should be the government leading. Well, the truth is, they've had all the money, and 50 years now, they haven't gone back to the moon. If you look at what Elon Musk is up to, right, with not even, I think it's like 100th of the budget, right? I'm making that number up, but it's in the way below. You can't even look at a graph and see the budget that NASA gets and compare it to what Elon Musk has done in the private sector, right? So the private sector has a plan to go to the moon. Elon Musk is a Bitcoiner. Let's be honest. He's a Bitcoiner, right? He's been buying the Bitcoin. He's talking about Bitcoin. He's one of the biggest private holders, as I understand. And so this Bitcoiner, right, is actually planning to go to the moon. Private industry, right? Not that he's just a Bitcoiner. He's a lot more than that. But certainly we could count him in the Bitcoin category. But even more impressive, just yesterday, Blockstream, who has been launching multiple satellites into space to run Bitcoin nodes, synced up some miners for the volcanoes in El Salvador. So you've got further linkages between extra-planetary infrastructure that Bitcoiners are independently and privately building in space versus the public sector, which is just complaining that they can't get there anymore and it's not fair and oh my goodness, it's not right, we should do it, right? So, but how have we found ourselves in this position? How have we found ourselves where NASA, with its huge budget, can't compete with a much smaller competitor and then claiming that it's unfair, right? Well, that's where the leaders part comes in, right? The leaders part, right? So dollars have leaders. Bernie is one of them, right? Bitcoin, no leaders. We got the moon rockets, but we don't have the leaders, right? Now you say, oh, leaders, Elon Musk is a leader. Well, actually, and I even said he's a Bitcoiner. Bitcoiners don't love the guy, right? He plays around, he manipulates markets. He's done it with Dogecoin. Now, I got no problem with what Elon Musk is up to. I know it triggers a lot of Bitcoiners. I don't care. I mean, he's operating at a level that I don't pretend to understand. Like, dogs don't really know the difference between, 80 IQ human beings and 130 IQ human beings. To a dog, it's just people, right? So when you're so much further, it's hard further below. It's hard to really gauge, even from a height perspective. If you're 3 feet tall, can you tell the difference between a 7 foot tall person and a 6 foot tall person? I mean, it's all just looking up, right? Hard to tell the difference. And That's kind of what it is with Elon Musk. I mean, he's fighting the. I'm not a fan of the SEC in the United States. I don't have the means to fight the SEC at the level that Elon Musk is fighting them, right? He's got bosses in front of him that I don't pretend to understand. I don't understand his relationship with the SEC, but I love when he trolls them, right? And I love when he mentions Dogecoin. I interpret that in my filter. Maybe it's just the feeble filter of someone with a, not 150 IQ. But, I say, he's doing God's work. He's trolling them with the Dogecoin and they're going crazy. And, even the title he took for his SEC filings, the Techno King, right? I mean, we have leaders, but not really in Bitcoin. He's a Techno King. So whatever way you can file that as leader of Bitcoin, then go ahead. But it's not a serious title. But it's not just the problem with people like Bernie Sanders who will cry about who's rich and they're not rich and it's not fair, right? It's not fair. Okay, well, it's true it's not fair. But I'll tell you something else that's not fair if you're in the mood for fairness right now, and that's what our former presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, said yesterday. So Hillary Clinton, back in the news, Hillary Clinton. So she was in a conference yesterday, and this is what Hillary Clinton said. So Hillary Clinton said, warned, what looks like a very interesting and exotic effort has the potential for undermining currencies, for undermining the role of dollars as reserve currencies, for destabilizing nations. There's a whole new layer of activity that could be extremely destabilizing, or in the wrong hands, or in alliances with the wrong people, could be direct threats to many of our nation state and certainly to the global currency markets. So Hillary Clinton said that. So we got a leader. I mean, if you consider her a leader, but I think it's undeniable whether you follow her or not, she's a leader, right? She ran for president and almost did a coup in the United States, right? Some said did do a coup in the United States. So, the dollar's got the leaders, right? So we don't really have those in Bitcoin. But what do the leaders do, right? The leaders are the ones, in this case, Hillary Clinton, complaining about Bitcoin. She's not really doing much to put rockets on the moon. She's too busy worrying about this, right? The thing with the rockets, right? So she's complaining that Bitcoin can do all these things. I think she's right. I mean, she's the first person to, of that stature to really get it the way she said it. It does have the power to undermine nation states, right? Make no mistake about Bitcoin. The people like myself who started in the early days, as wild of an idea as it was, we said, we're going to take this sucker down. We're going to take down the US dollar. And people thought we were crazy, right? For us, it was imperative because the fiat system allowed for situations where everyone's just fighting and no one's ever going to come to a conclusion. And it's not like we were ever going to convince Democrats of any of this stuff. For myself anyway, I was working for a federal government before, Stephen Harper in Canada. And we were sort of one of these original populist-ish movements predating Trump. Rob Ford, you would recognize as another part of that early Trumpism. Before it hit America, it was in Canada in a nascent proto-form. And I was a part of it. And I know it was nascent proto-form because the mainstream media and even normal people called us Nazis all the time, right? And I knew these people were not going to be convinced of anything. So right away I said, it's not an arguing thing. We're not going to get right about this. There's something wrong underlying that's even allowed for these people to exist in the first place. And anyone who saw early Bitcoin knew it was the pollution and corruption inside of the money, right? The money itself, the spirit of the money, had been filled with misaligned incentives and were certainly creating more damage at that point, especially out of the financial crisis, than they were doing as far as benefit. So while the US economy still had a ton of energy and a ton of enthusiasm and momentum, it had nowhere to go because the spirit of the money had already been crushed, right? It had already been a matter of leaders' policy and as they've said, moral obligations to fix this and that. And the moral case, of course, that Alan Greenspan made for the Federal Reserve in the 1990s and its collusion with policymakers. where we find ourselves today. So this collusion with leadership, right, has greatly affected the quality of the money, the quality, right? Bitcoin, of course, doesn't have that, right? It doesn't have that. Now, going further, these leaders, right, can do one other thing, and we see it now. And the case in China can prove this point, and I think illustrate what's already happening here in America. Peng Shui. Peng Shui is her name. Say her name, they say. Say her name, they say. Peng Shui, right? I hope I got it right. She is a tennis player, a female professional tennis player on the WTA circuit. So that means she plays against Serena Williams, and whose husband was with us last week talking about leaderless cryptocurrencies. He was in Lisbon at the event that I helped produce. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. She tweeted, Serena Williams herself retweeted, "Where is Peng Shui? Where is she?" Right? Because she's gone missing. Now, she's not just anyone who's gone missing. This is a woman who has said she was raped by a high-ranking member of the Chinese Communist Party, right? So she's a Chinese national. She stated publicly that she was raped by a member of the Chinese Communist Party. And since then, she's gone missing. She's disappeared. No one has seen her. No one's heard of her. That's why Serena Williams has tweeted, "Where is Peng Shui?" Now, we can all guess where she is. It looks like the embarrassment she's caused the Chinese Communist Party has caused her to be disappeared. Will we ever see her again? My prediction is no. I mean, I can't imagine it. This is a rapist regime full of rapers. One can only imagine. I mean, I've heard stories about what Mao was like in his time. I doubt it's changed too much. I mean, that was a big rape den back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He had a prolific sexual appetite, in case anyone hasn't heard of those stories before. Prolific. Banged his way across the most populous country at its most fecund time in history. So we've got a lot of rapers, I imagine, over there. And now this woman has gone missing because she exposed the rapiness, right? So she's a type of political prisoner or political casualty. And that's what happens when you have these leaders, right, who are tied in with the money. You don't get rockets, right? China says they're going to get it, but the rapists, that regime, I don't think has too many years left to get to the moon. Chinese people are going to make it to the moon for sure, but I don't think it's going to be a CCP flag they plant up there and that hammer and sickle is staying on Earth as far as I can tell. Because they've got leaders, that's their problem. And the leaders get political prisoners, the ones they rape, right? Or in the case of the United States, how many political prisoners do we have now? We have Hillary Clinton criticizing Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, right? Not criticizing a lack of rocket funding or rocket capacity from the United States, but certainly responsible in part for the mess of January 6th. How many people are still in prison for that, right? I saw a protest. I don't know about you. I saw a protest, right? I saw the people's real estate, the House and Senate, disgraced. Yeah, sure. Embarrassed, denigrated by the people that walk through, the guy with the hat and the horn guy and all that, the Viking people, right? But that guy got 41 months in jail. 41 months in jail for embarrassing some politicians, right? So if that's not leader ego, I don't know what is, right? You got socially sanctioned protests that can burn cities down, right? So I'm not trying to bring up hypocrisy here, right? There's definitely a double standard, though. There's definitely a double standard. And so the folks who are political prisoners right now are really political prisoners to the dollar, right? Because you've got Hillary Clinton, who can't actually live in a world with this. She said it herself. It destabilizes her idea of nation state. If the wrong people get it, who are the wrong people? It's the political prisoners or the people who want to go to the moon, right? Bitcoiners, right? Those are the people that are going to destabilize nations. She said it herself. She's predicted it herself, right? It's already in the wrong hands, right? There's already people like myself who have been conspiring for years to turn human greed and human selfishness, right, into a leveraged power that goes beyond debate. It goes beyond, oh, liberals, stop borrowing money to pay for this. Stop running the economy like it's a policy engine, right? We're not arguing those things anymore. The point is to build Bitcoin up enough, and when it's time to bring the full leverage down on nation state apparatus, right? Think of it as like a boxer, okay? Bitcoin has just been sitting there with the people who understand risk, the people who understand trading, the people who understand leverage, right? When they talk about democratizing finance, that means democratizing understanding what it is to lose, right? Bitcoiners have lost. They've seen their assets plunged for years at a time, right? Almost wiped out, but they didn't sell because the psychology held intact, right? The psychology held intact that long term, right? Long term, the dollar will die and Bitcoin will reign supreme. And so what I predict you're going to see in the short term is countries, smaller countries first, right? Like Canada, like Australia, right? You're going to see Bitcoin almost as a nation go into these and knock the hell out of their fiat currencies. And I mean real speculative attacks, right? And you're going to see that Bitcoin is a world heavyweight champion when it comes to financial power. And the result in the end, I predict, with a couple of small title fights, a couple of small warm-up fights with a couple of countries, you're going to get the main title bout, and it's going to be US dollar versus Bitcoin. And when that knockout punch comes, it'll be in the way of commodity markets being priced in Bitcoin, so oil, gas, energy in the end, priced in Bitcoin because it's a better measuring stick, right? It's a better way to gauge these industries than the US dollar, because the US dollar has to factor in all of these things, right? The political prisoners, their needs, their incentives, their wants, how the leaders are keeping them suppressed, right? And in the end, they can't even focus on things like moon rockets, right? There's no time, right? But the decentralized nature of Bitcoin allows for moon exploration, right? It's almost entirely the system around Bitcoin is literally about going to the moon, right? And it's not necessarily metaphoric. We talk about the price going to the moon, but it is in fact the domination of space by private interests, by entrepreneurs, explorers who aren't begging the Queen of Spain to fund trips to the New World so that they can reap all of those harvests back to a nation state, right? That's not the game we're playing here, right? This is independent explorers going to claim resources on behalf of humanity. And Bitcoiners are going to get to the moon first. And we're not waiting for no Bernie Sanders comply. Oh, it's not fair. It's not fair. Political prisoners aren't fair, Bernie. And you made that happen. All right. You didn't stand up to your own party. You kowtowed, right? You kowtowed to Nazis, right? And I don't throw around Nazis very easily, right? I don't. Right? I've been called it enough to know that you don't throw it around. But anyone who's putting political prisoners away, anyone who would do a lot of the things, maybe not Hillary Clinton herself, but some of the people around her have done, like the coup in the United States, those folks are going to be on the wrong side, right? So this is it. This is the contrast. We got moon rockets. They don't. They got leaders and political prisoners. We don't, right? So that's should be enough reason for today to break up. Should be enough reason for today. And places like China and the United States are not that much different, especially when you compare this political prisoners piece, right? Especially when you compare this political prisoners piece. All right, everyone. Another episode of The Breakup. Thanks. See you tomorrow. Always news to fill this space, so should be interesting stuff. Thanks for your time.